It's 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I'm sitting at my kitchen table in my small apartment, laptop open, spreadsheet glowing in the dark. I've been staring at the same numbers for 23 minutes. I have a college degree, a good one. I work 47 hours a week at a respectable job. I make $68,000 a year, which, according to every article I've read, should be enough. I don't buy lattes every day. I canceled Netflix and Hulu. I meal prep on Sundays. I drive a used Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. I have a budget. I track every expense. I've read the books. I've listened to the podcasts. I'm doing everything right. And I have $1,200 in my savings account. After 3 years of being responsible, after cutting every unnecessary expense, after sacrificing and optimizing and doing exactly what the financial gurus told me to do, $1,200. That's it. That's what I have to show for 3 years of discipline. I look at the numbers again. Rent, $1,800. Student loan payment, $380. Car insurance, $165. Health insurance, $220. Groceries, $320. Gas, $180. Utilities, $110. Phone, $75. That's $3,250 right before I've done anything, before I've lived, before I've had any fun, before I've saved a single dollar. My take-home after taxes is $4,200 a month, which means I have $950 left for everything else. And by everything else, I mean living, existing, being a human being who occasionally needs to see friends or buy a birthday gift or replace the shoes that are falling apart or go to the dentist. And here's what makes me want to scream. My coworker, Jake, who makes the same salary as me, who lives in a nicer apartment, who drives a newer car, who goes out every weekend, somehow seems fine. He's not stressed. He's not counting pennies. And when I asked him about his budget, he laughed and said he doesn't have one. This is the moment I realized something that made my stomach turn. The game is rigged, and not in the way you think. I'm not failing because I'm doing something wrong. I'm failing because I'm playing a game where the rules were written to guarantee I lose. This is the doing everything right trap. By following conventional financial advice designed for a world that no longer exists, you mathematically guarantee you will stay broke. You trade your energy for a performance of responsibility that doesn't actually build wealth. And in doing so, you become the perfect economic citizen, always working, never accumulating, permanently one emergency away from disaster. My name is Sam, and I spend way too much time studying why people who do everything right stay broke, while people who seemingly break all the rules somehow build wealth. If you are someone who has a budget, who tracks expenses, who makes decent money but still can't get ahead, or if you've ever felt like you're working twice as hard as your parents did for half the result, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this resonates with you. Because today, we're going to expose one of the most toxic lies in personal finance. We're going to talk about why your budget is a trap, why cutting lattes is a scam, why the system needs you broke, and why everything you've been taught about building wealth is designed to keep you exactly where you are. We're going to look at the wage stagnation reality, the hidden inflation tax, and why your parents' playbook doesn't work in 2026. Here's the thing about doing everything right financially. It's advice designed for an economy that died 40 years ago. It's driven by the myth that personal responsibility alone can overcome structural economic shifts. It's driven by a fundamental misunderstanding of what changed. In 1980, when your parents were your age, the median home cost 3.5 times the median household income. Today, it costs 7.2 times. In 1980, college tuition at a public university cost $2,100 a year. Today, it costs $28,000. In 1980, the average rent was 22% of median income. Today, it's 41%. But wages? Adjusted for inflation, wages have been basically flat since 1979. You're making roughly the same as your parents did at your age, except housing costs twice as much, education costs 13 times as much, healthcare costs 4 times as much, childcare costs 3 times as much. You're not bad with money. The money is bad. The system requires more from you to survive and pays you less to do it. And then it tells you that if you're struggling, it's because you bought avocado toast. The math doesn't work anymore, and no amount of budgeting will fix broken math. Let's talk about what doing everything right actually cost you. And I'm not talking about the opportunity cost of missing investments. I'm talking about the energy cost, the mental load cost, the psychological toll of constantly optimizing poverty. You spend 3 hours every Sunday meal prepping to save $60 a week on food. That's $240 a month. Over a year, you saved $2,880. Congratulations, you worked 156 hours for $2,880. That's $18.46 an hour, less than minimum wage in many states, and you did it on top of your 47-hour work week. You spend 45 minutes every day commuting from your cheaper apartment further from work. That's an extra 7.5 hours a week. That's 390 hours a year. You traded 390 hours of your life to save $300 a month in rent, $3,600 a year. That's $9.23 an hour for sitting in traffic. You canceled all your streaming services to save $45 a month. You stopped going to coffee shops. You quit the gym and work out at home. You cut your haircut budget. You shop at thrift stores. You say no to every social invitation that costs money. After a year of these optimizations, you've saved approximately $8,000. That sounds impressive until you realize you worked an additional 600 hours to do it. That's $13.33 an hour, and you spent an entire year socially isolated, physically exhausted, and mentally depleted. Meanwhile, your rent went up $150 a month, your car insurance went up $20 a month, your grocery bill went up 8% because of inflation, your student loan interest added $840 to your balance, and you got sick once and had to pay your $2,000 deductible. You ran 600 hours of overtime just to stay in the exact same place. You're not building wealth, you're optimizing poverty, and the system is designed to make you think that's your fault. Now let's talk about what actually happened to the economy, because this is where the lie becomes clear. From 1948 to 1973, worker productivity and worker compensation moved together. When workers produced more value, they were paid more. This was the golden age of American prosperity. A single income could buy a house, support a family, save for retirement, and take a vacation every year. Then something broke. From 1973 to 2023, productivity increased 77%. Compensation increased 17%. The gap between what workers produce and what workers are paid grew exponentially. Where did that money go? Corporate profits, CEO compensation, shareholder returns. In 1965, the average CEO made 20 times what the average worker made. Today, it's 344 times. You are producing more value than your parents ever did. You're more educated, more skilled, more productive, but you're capturing less of the value you create. The system extracts more from you and gives you less, and then it tells you to budget harder. Here's the brutal truth. Your boss got a 40% raise over the last 5 years. You got 3% annually, which doesn't even cover inflation. Your company's stock price tripled. Your rent doubled. Your productivity made someone very wealthy. It just wasn't you. You're not failing at capitalism. Capitalism is failing you, and budgeting won't fix that.
Let's talk about the single biggest wealth destroyer for your generation: housing. Your parents bought a house in 1992 for $120,000 with a 20% down payment of $24,000. They saved that down payment in 3 years while paying rent. Their mortgage payment was $650 a month. That was 18% of their household income. You're trying to buy a house in 2025 for $485,000. You need a 20% down payment of $97,000. At your current savings rate of $200 a month, that'll take you 40 years to save. 40 years. Even if you could magically save $97,000 tomorrow, your mortgage payment would be $2,800 a month. That's 49% of your gross income. No bank will approve that. So you're trapped renting, where rent costs $1,800 a month. That's 38% of your gross income going to a landlord's mortgage instead of your own. Every month, you pay $1,800 to live somewhere. Your landlord's equity increases. Your net worth doesn't. Over 5 years, you will pay $108,000 in rent. Your landlord will gain approximately $85,000 in equity from your payments plus appreciation. You will gain $0. This isn't because you're bad with money. This is because the cost of entry into wealth-building assets increased 700% while your income stayed flat. The ladder was pulled up, and you're being told to climb harder. Your parents built their wealth through housing appreciation. They bought a $120,000 house that's now worth $485,000. That's $365,000 in unearned wealth that required no additional work. Meanwhile, you can't even get on the ladder. The Doing Everything Right playbook assumes you can access the same wealth-building tools your parents had, but those tools are now locked behind a price point you mathematically cannot reach. Now let's address the lie you were sold about education. You were told, go to college, get a degree, get a good job, build a career. This is the path to prosperity. So you did. You went to a state university, you were responsible, you didn't go to some expensive private school, you graduated in 4 years, you got a degree in a practical field, you did everything right. And you graduated with $42,000 in student loan debt at 6.8% interest. Your payment is $380 a month for the next 10 years. Over the life of that loan, you will pay $45,600 in interest. You paid $42,000 for an education, and you'll pay $87,600 total by the time you're done. That $380 a month is money that doesn't go into a 401k, doesn't go into a down payment fund, doesn't go into investments. If you invested that $380 a month instead for 10 years at 8% returns, you'd have $69,000, but you can't because you were responsible and got an education. Meanwhile, your coworker Jake didn't go to college. He started working at 18. He makes the same salary as you because turns out the degree didn't matter as much as they said it would. But he doesn't have $380 leaving his account every month. He doesn't have $42,000 of debt that can never be discharged. He bought a house 3 years ago because he actually had money for a down payment. You did everything right. You followed the path they laid out, and it left you 10 years behind someone who skipped it. The education system isn't designed to build your wealth. It's designed to extract wealth from you for 30 years while convincing you it's an investment. Here's the hidden tax nobody talks about when they tell you to just save more. The Federal Reserve targets 2% inflation annually. That sounds small, that sounds manageable, but over the last 5 years, real inflation has been closer to 5 to 6% annually, especially in the things you actually buy: food, housing, energy, healthcare. This means your dollar loses 5 to 6% of its purchasing power every year. If you're saving $200 a month in a savings account earning 0.5% interest, you're not saving money. You're losing purchasing power. Your $200 becomes $188 in real terms every year. Over 10 years, if you diligently save $200 a month in a savings account, you'll have $24,000 in nominal terms. But in purchasing power, adjusted for real inflation at 5%, you'll have $18,600 in today's dollars. You saved for a decade, and you actually lost $5,400 in real value. But it gets worse. Remember how I said your rent went up, your insurance went up, your groceries went up? Those increases weren't random. That's inflation eating you alive. Your income went up 3% annually, your costs went up 5 to 6% annually. Every year, you get 2 to 3% poorer. This is the treadmill. You work harder, you optimize more, you save diligently, and inflation ensures you never get ahead. The finish line moves backwards faster than you run forward. The doing everything right advice tells you to save in a savings account, but savings accounts guarantee you lose money in real terms. You're being told to use a wealth destruction tool and being praised for it. Now let's talk about the expense that can wipe out years of doing everything right in a single week: healthcare. You have health insurance. You're responsible. You pay $220 a month for the privilege. That's $2,640 a year. Your deductible is $2,000. Your out-of-pocket max is $6,500. Last year, you got sick. Nothing dramatic. You just needed to see a doctor a few times, get some tests, get a prescription. Total, $3,800. Insurance covered $1,200. You paid $2,600 out of pocket. So you paid $2,640 for insurance plus $2,600 in actual medical costs. That's $5,240 for basic health care. That's 2 months of your entire take-home pay, gone, for being sick. Your entire savings account, wiped out. That emergency fund you built over 2 years, gone in one medical event. And you start over at zero. But the real trap is you can't not have insurance, because if you didn't have insurance and got really sick, you'd be $50,000 in debt. So you pay $220 for insurance that doesn't actually cover your costs until you've already paid thousands. Your parents' generation had health insurance that actually worked. Their employer covered it. Their deductibles were $100. Co-pays were $10. Healthcare was something that happened, not something that bankrupted you. You pay more for insurance that covers less and still get destroyed by out-of-pocket costs. And the FA advice says build an emergency fund. Great, you did. It lasted one doctor's visit. The system requires you to have insurance you can't afford that doesn't protect you from costs that can bankrupt you. And if you're struggling to save after paying all this, the advice is cut your Starbucks budget. Now let's talk about why Jake seems fine and you're drowning. You see Jake living his life, nice apartment, new car, going out on weekends, taking vacations, not stressed about money. And you think, what am I doing wrong? He makes the same as me. Here's what you don't see. Jake's parents paid for his college, no student loans. That's $380 you don't pay that he does. That's $4,560 a year. Over 10 years, that's $45,600 he has that you don't. Jake's parents gave him $15,000 for a down payment on his first car when he turned 18. He's never had a car payment. You've paid $12,000 in car payments over the last 4 years. Jake lived at home until he was 26 and saved $60,000. You moved out at 22 because your parents couldn't house you and have paid $86,400 in rent since then. Jake got sick last year. His parents paid the medical bills, $2,600 that didn't come from his account. Jake is not better with money than you. Jake has a family wealth transfer of approximately $150,000 over the last 8 years that you don't. He has a completely different starting point, different safety net, different financial reality. But nobody talks about that. They just say Jake is good with money and you need to budget better. The game is not fair. The starting positions are not equal, and you're being told you're losing because you're not trying hard enough. You're not failing. You're playing a game you were never meant to win.
Here's the cost nobody calculates: the mental and emotional toll of constantly optimizing poverty. You check your bank account 14 times a day. You feel anxiety every time you swipe your card. You calculate whether you can afford a $12 sandwich. You say no to every invitation because you're saving money. You feel guilt when you spend $8 on something that makes you momentarily happy. You spend hours comparing prices, clipping digital coupons, waiting for sales. You drive to 3 different grocery stores to get the best deals. You spend your evening scrolling for cheaper insurance quotes.
You spend your weekend doing tasks you could pay for but won't because you're being responsible. This constant state of financial vigilance is exhausting. It's cognitively expensive. Studies show that financial stress reduces your IQ by 13 points. That's the equivalent of losing a full night's sleep or being legally intoxicated. You're trying to make smart financial decisions while your brain is impaired by the stress of making smart financial decisions. The mental load of poverty management prevents you from thinking strategically about wealth building. You're so busy optimizing pennies that you can't think about dollars. You're so focused on surviving this month that you can't plan for next year. And then the advice says, just think long term. But thinking long term is a luxury available only to people who aren't constantly in short-term crisis mode. The do everything right playbook creates a psychological trap where you're too exhausted and stressed to actually build wealth. You're perpetually in survival mode, performing responsibility. Now, let me be honest about the 3 situations where doing everything right actually works. 1, you make significantly more than median income. If you're making $150,000 plus in a medium cost of living area, the math works. You have enough margin that budgeting and optimization actually creates wealth. But that's not most people. That's about 10% of workers. 2, you have 0 structural disadvantages. No student loans, no medical issues, family safety net if things go wrong, started with some wealth transfer, access to low-cost housing. If you have all of these, then yes, budgeting and discipline builds wealth. But again, that's not most people. 3, you're willing to make extreme sacrifices that most people can't or shouldn't make. Living with 6 roommates at 35, working 80 hours a week, never having children, never taking vacation, moving every 2 years to chase marginal savings. If you're willing to optimize your entire life around money to the exclusion of everything else, it works. But at what cost? For everyone else, the 85% of people who make median income or less, who have structural disadvantages, who want to have a life beyond work and optimization, doing everything right doesn't work. It just doesn't. The math is broken. So what's the actual answer? If budgeting doesn't work, if saving doesn't work, if doing everything right doesn't work, then what does? The answer is uncomfortable. You need to increase your income dramatically, or you need to change the system. Those are your options. Cutting expenses has a floor. You can't cut rent to 0. You can't eliminate food costs. You can't stop having medical expenses. There's a minimum cost to exist. And for most people, that minimum is 80 to 90% of their income. But income has no ceiling. You can earn $50,000, you can earn $100,000, you can earn $200,000. The only path to wealth when the math is broken is to bring in exponentially more money. This means switching careers, learning high-income skills, starting a business, creating additional income streams, negotiating aggressively, moving to higher-paying markets, doing things that are risky and scary and might fail. The conventional advice says save and invest your way to wealth. But when you're starting with $200 a month, that math takes 40 years. You need to 10x your income or change the structural conditions that make wealth building impossible. This isn't about budgeting, it's about power. Who has it, how they use it, and how you take some back. Here's what I want you to do right now. I want you to stop optimizing poverty and start building power. Open a document. I want you to run the real math on your situation. Calculate your total monthly essential expenses: rent, insurance, debt payments, food, utilities, transportation. Be honest. That number is your survival floor. Now look at your income. Subtract the survival floor. What's left is your margin. For most people, it's $200 to $500 a month. Now multiply that margin by 12. That's your annual margin. For most people, it's $2,400 to $6,000. Now understand this. At that margin, with conservative 8% investment returns, it will take you 35 to 40 years to accumulate $500,000. That's not enough to retire on. That's not generational wealth. That's barely financial security. The problem is not your budget. The problem is your margin.
So here's the action step. Stop trying to optimize your expenses. They're already optimized. You've cut everything you can cut. Start asking a different question. How can I 2x my income in the next 24 months? Not how can I save $50 on groceries? How can I make $2,000 more per month? This might mean learning to code, learning sales, starting a side business, switching industries, negotiating hard for a promotion, moving to a different market, getting uncomfortable. Stop defending your poverty budget as responsible. Start aggressively pursuing income that makes the budget irrelevant. The system wants you focused on lattes. Focus on leverage instead. Here's the truth they don't want you to understand. Your budget is a distraction. The financial advice industrial complex makes billions telling you to cut expenses, track spending, optimize savings. Why? Because it keeps you focused on your individual behavior instead of the structural conditions that guarantee you stay broke. They tell you to skip coffee so you don't ask why wages are stagnant. They tell you to meal prep so you don't ask why groceries cost twice what they did 5 years ago. They tell you to live below your means so you don't ask why the means are too low to live on. Your budget is not the problem. The economy that requires you to have an impossibly perfect budget just to survive is the problem. You're not bad with money. The money is bad with you. Stop blaming yourself for broken math. Stop optimizing poverty. Stop doing everything right according to rules that were written to keep you in place. Start asking who benefits from your constant financial stress. Start asking why productivity went up 77%, but your pay went up 17%. Start asking why your parents could buy a house on one income, but you can't on two. The game is rigged, and the first step to winning a rigged game is stopping pretending it's fair. If this video made you realize you're not failing, the system is, share it with someone else who's doing everything right and still broke. Help them stop blaming themselves. Help them see the trap. Because the world doesn't need more people perfectly managing poverty. The world needs more people who refuse to accept that this is as good as it gets. You deserve better than a perfect budget that leads nowhere. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.